A black family vanished from their home in Mississippi in 1996. No struggle, no signs of forced entry, no goodbye. One night, the lights in the house went out, and by morning, so had they. Mother, father, daughter, son, for names erased. Their dinner plates were still on the table. The TV was still playing. The front door was locked from the inside. And for 10 years, no one found a trace. No footprints. No vehicle. Not even a missing persons flyer that made the local paper. It was like the world had agreed to forget them, until a storm rolled in and tore off a roof tile on a house that no one had touched in a decade. A neighbor called it in, said it smelled like something old, something wrong. And what they found in the attic shook the country to its bones. The family's name was the Whitakers, Charles and Diane, and their 2 kids, Angela, age 14, and little Marcus, just 9. They lived in a modest 1-story home in Madison County, just a few miles from Jackson, a safe neighborhood, quiet, the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. Charles worked for the post office. Diane taught 3rd grade at the local elementary. They were loved, respected, steady, and then they were gone. April 3rd, 1996. Diane didn't show up for work. She had perfect attendance. Angela didn't get on the bus. Marcus wasn't in his classroom. Charles didn't clock in at 7:30 a.m. It was like someone had pressed a button, and the Whitakers had simply ceased to be. Neighbors knocked, called. No answer. By that evening, police did a welfare check. What they found was unsettling, but not alarming. Food on the table, yes. TV on, yes. But no signs of violence. No blood. No smashed windows. The back door was unlocked, but there were no tire tracks on the lawn. No neighbors heard a scream. It was like the house had just exhaled, and everything inside had vanished into that breath. The first theory? They ran. Maybe money problems. Maybe something criminal. Maybe they left under duress. But their bank accounts were untouched. Charles's last paycheck was still in the mailbox. Angela's diary, left on her bed, had no sign of planning, fear, or goodbyes. One entry just a week before said, "Mom said I can have a sleepover next month. Gotta clean my room or she'll change her mind." Well, nothing in her words hinted at fear. Nothing in their lives hinted at disappearance. But no one was ever seen again. The official file was opened. The Whitaker family disappearance. 2 officers were assigned. Neither stayed long. By 1999, it became one of Mississippi's most obscure cold cases. The kind that gets passed to new detectives as a formality. No suspects. No evidence. Just a locked house and silence. But in the summer of 2006, something changed. A violent storm rolled across the South. It tore shingles off homes, downed trees, smashed windows. The Whitaker house, abandoned, dusty, still untouched after 10 years, lost part of its roof. A neighbor named Evelyn Parker, now in her 60s, noticed something. "I swear I saw something moving up there," she told reporters later. "Just a shadow, but it didn't look right." She called the sheriff's office. They sent a crew to inspect the damage. The crew brought ladders. Climbed up. That's when they noticed something strange. The attic window, dusty and cracked, had a child's handprint on the inside of the glass. But the house was sealed. No break-ins. No squatters. And that attic window was nailed shut from the inside. They broke the nails, opened it, and inside they found the bed. Just one, twin size, worn mattress, and beside it a plastic tape recorder. Old, covered in dust, battery corroded, and yet it had a tape still inside. Forensics took it, cleaned it, played it, And what they heard, a girl's voice, faint, afraid, but deliberate. If someone finds this, my name is Angela Whitaker. I think it's been 3 days since they stopped feeding us. We're in the house. We never left. He put us in the dark. He locked the upstairs from the inside. Silence, then static, then breathing, and then he keeps saying we're part of Foundation now. The attic was torn apart. Under the mattress, fingernails, human, broken, in the far corner, etched into the wall with a button or pin. YNGLAWSHRE. Each letter carefully carved. Each one like a scream in wood. Forensics returned to the house. This time, they opened floorboards. Beneath the attic, between the insulation and the rafters, they found 4 sets of remains, all preserved in the dry heat of the sealed attic. No sunlight, no mold, just skeletons tangled together in a fetal pile. The medical examiner confirmed it within a week. Charles, Diane, Angela, Marcus, they never left. 10 years, and they'd been above everyone's heads, buried in the ceiling of their own home. Not under it, not outside, above. The attic hadn't just been a storage space. It had become their tomb. And the final piece, found inside the wall, a voice recorder, the second tape, cracked but readable. It played a single whisper. Not Angela this time. A man's voice. I told them this house is mine now. They wouldn't listen. Then a chuckle, low, quiet, and then unmistakably. She kept screaming. I asked her if she could hear the nails going in. The world watched in horror. It wasn't just a case of a missing family. It was a case of a family buried inside their own home by someone who believed he owned the house and everything inside. But the question still remained. Who was he? The voice didn't match Charles or any family friend. The police had never found fingerprints in the house. No break-in, no intruder. The man had somehow moved in, and no one saw him come or go. And that's when a neighbor came forward, reluctantly. He said something odd happened the week the Whitakers vanished. A strange man was seen trimming the hedges, wearing a church usher's suit. Said he was sent by the landlord to maintain the property. But the Whitakers owned their house. There was no landlord. And this man, he gave no name, drove no car, just walked up from the woods and disappeared again just as quietly. And when they showed the neighbor the voice from the tape, he froze. That's him, he whispered, the man from the hedges. And now the question is this. Who was the man in the attic? Why did no one hear the screams? And why did it take 10 years for the truth to rise through the ceiling? Because sometimes evil doesn't kick the door in. Sometimes it's already inside, wearing a suit, smiling, waiting for night to fall, so it can claim what it believes is already its. They had names now. The bones, the shadows. They weren't just remains. They were Charles, Diane, Angela, and Marcus Whitaker, murdered, hidden, and forgotten in their own attic for 10 years. And still, no one could answer the question at the center of it all. Who did this? Who could lock a family away, 1 floor above their own lives, and vanish without a trace? The FBI took over within 24 hours of the attic discovery. Special Agent Yvonne Lake was assigned lead. She was methodical, cold on the outside, but she carried a photograph of her own daughter in her coat pocket. The case got under her skin faster than she wanted to admit. For people don't vanish into a ceiling, she said. Not unless someone helps them disappear. She ordered a full forensic sweep. Every nail, every beam, every fiber of insulation was examined. And slowly, the picture began to form. There were drag marks in the attic dust. Faint, years old, Some indicated a struggle, small scratches, nail indentations, blood residue. Others suggested the bodies had been moved after death, which meant they weren't all killed at once. But it was Angela's final recording, the tape labeled in faded pink ink with a heart sticker, that cracked the silence wide open. Forensics had restored it, and the full transcript was chilling. I think Marcus is still breathing, but he's cold. Mommy cried all night. She told me not to make noise. The man said he owns a house now. He told Daddy to kneel. I heard a loud sound. Then nothing. The man, whoever he was, took his time. Angela's diary had been overlooked during the original 1996 search, but now it was re-examined. The last page was blank, but written in invisible ink, revealed under UV light, were the words, "He lives under the stairs. He only comes out when everyone is asleep. Daddy thinks it's rats. I know the man." Agent Lake stared at the page for a long time. She whispered only one word, "Parasite." The working theory became horrifying. The Whitakers didn't just get murdered. They were stalked by someone who had already been living inside the house, possibly for weeks, maybe months, hidden in the crawl spaces, behind the walls, beneath the stairs, watching them, learning them, waiting for the right night to take control. And then came the letter, delivered anonymously, typed, postmarked from Atlanta. It read, he called himself Father Eli. He was not a preacher. He didn't believe in God. He believed he was sent to test families, to see how long they could survive in the dark. At the bottom, no signature, just the same symbol that had appeared before in other unsolved Southern crimes. A cross split in two. The FBI's database lit up. That same symbol had been found on two unsolved cases in Tennessee and Alabama. Both involved missing families. Both homes later found empty. And in one case, in Tuscaloosa, a wall had been torn open years later. Inside, a single child's shoe, and the phrase, "He is with us always," scratched into drywall. The connection was undeniable. Who was Father Eli? The name didn't exist in any local church records. No birth certificate. No fingerprints. No arrest history. But then a janitor at a halfway house in Birmingham called in after seeing the news report. He said a man lived in the basement there briefly in 1995. Tall, gray coat, soft-spoken, wore gloves even in summer, and he carried a Bible with every page blacked out with ink. Inside the front cover of that Bible, he'd written one phrase, "To live inside their house is to live inside their sin." When staff asked for his name, he gave it without blinking. "I'm Father Eli. I build the homes. I cleanse the rooms." He vanished 2 weeks later. No one reported it, because no one knew who he was. Agent Lake returned to the Whitaker house. She stood in the doorway for nearly 10 minutes, just staring, and then she said, "He chose this house for a reason." They examined the original blueprints of the property, built in 1972, one owner before the Whitakers, and in the original plans there was a second attic, sealed after a fire in 1981, never reopened. Lake ordered it torn open. What they found inside, a sleeping bag, empty food tins, and drawings, crude sketches, all done in charcoal, each one depicting the same thing, a family, smiling, sitting in a living room, while a dark figure loomed just behind the wall. In one, the figure's eyes glowed. In another, he was inside the ceiling, watching them from above. One drawing stood out. It showed a girl, Angela, brushing her teeth. In the mirror behind her, the man, hands pressed to the glass. The words written below in block letters, "I am in the house." The FBI reclassified the case. Not just a domestic murder, not just a cold case, but the work of a southern nomadic predator, someone who had mastered how to live unseen, to wait, to whisper, to erase. He was not a drifter in the usual sense. He was a parasite in denim and breath. And now they feared he was still out there. More evidence surfaced. A retired hardware store clerk in Jackson came forward. He remembered a man, no name, no ID, buying heavy-duty nails, rope, and insulation tape in 1996. Paid in cash. Wore gloves. Didn't speak. But when shown the voice from Angela's tape, the old man stepped back. "That's him," he whispered. "The quiet one. The one who said he needed to soundproof the attic." All trails led cold again, until a final breakthrough came from a place no one expected. An old locksmith, still operating on the edge of town. He had a log, handwritten, decades old. And in 1996, he was called for a job at the Whitaker residence. But the person who called wasn't Charles. It wasn't Diane. The name given? Eli F. Owens. Owens. A name. The first real name they'd had in a decade. A search of public records revealed only one possible match. Elijah Franklin Owens. Born in Georgia. Orphaned. Institutionalized at age 9. Released at 19. No known next of kin. And then he vanished. The pieces were falling into place. But one question still echoed. Why? Why stalk families? Why move into their homes like a ghost? Why the attic? Agent Lake had a theory. She believed Owens, father Eli, had grown up in orphanages, abused, locked in small rooms, attics, closets, basements. And when he got out, he didn't leave the darkness behind. He became it. He wasn't killing for pleasure. He was trying to recreate something, to make others feel what he had lived through, to build a world of quiet where no one escaped the walls. And the Whitakers, they were just next on the blueprint. But they left something behind he couldn't erase. Angela's voice, Angela's words, her name scratched into wood. Because in the end, even when the light is gone, the truth still scratches back. By now, one name echoed in every hallway of the FBI's Southern Crimes Unit. Elijah Franklin Owens, the man who called himself Father Eli, the man who lived in the walls, the man who turned homes into graves. He was no longer a myth, not a whisper, not a shadow. He had a name, a childhood, a paper trail, and every piece of that trail bled darkness. He was born in 1960 in Fulton County, Georgia. No father listed. Mother, Veronica Owens, age 17. She disappeared 6 months after Elijah's birth. Presumed runaway. Never found. He was placed into the St. Bartholomew's Orphanage for Boys, just outside Atlanta. It was run by the church. It was also under federal investigation by the early 70s for repeated violations, unreported physical abuse, allegations of sexual assault, solitary confinement for discipline, malnourishment. It was a place built for silence. And Elijah, small, underweight, often mute, was described by one former worker as a shadow that stayed out of the way. But when he stared at you, it felt like the room got colder. He lived in room 4C, the attic dorm, 6 beds, 1 dim light bulb. Records show that Elijah spent over 240 hours in solitary confinement between 1969 and 1973. They didn't call it solitary, though they called it reflection, which meant a wooden box, no windows, no light, no food for 24 hours. One surviving report read, Eli was found whispering to himself inside the crawlspace again. He says there are voices in the wood. Sent him to reflection. By age 13, Elijah stopped speaking altogether. No crying, no laughter, no questions. He would just sit unmoving for hours. Then, one night in 1975, a fire broke out in the eastern wing. 2 boys died. Another was never identified. Elijah was blamed. But without proof, they couldn't charge him. So he was quietly transferred to a private psychiatric facility called the Marlowe Institute. And from that day forward, his file was sealed. Agent Lake filed a court order for access. It took 2 weeks. Inside the documents, one phrase kept reappearing in the margins, written by hand in red ink by multiple staff. He draws houses, always attics. Says the attic is where God listens. By 1979, Elijah was deemed mentally stable, released into state custody at age 19. And after that, nothing. No jobs, no ID, no fixed address. He fell off the map until the Whitaker house. Lake believed Elijah wasn't homeless in the traditional sense. He was home-obsessed, but not from the outside. He didn't want the kitchen, the bed, the couch. He wanted the guts of the house, the beams, the crawl spaces, the places no one looked, because that's where he had lived, as a child, as a boy without love, locked in wooden boxes. And when he became a man, he turned houses into those boxes again. But one question still burned at the center of it all. Why the Whitakers? Why that family? Why that home? The answer came from the mother of a classmate. Her name was Ramona Bell. She'd been Diane Whitaker's friend. They taught at the same elementary school. And when shown a photograph of Elijah Owens as a teenager, Ramona went still. "Oh, God," she said. "That's the man from the church." She explained. In the early 90s, Diane had taken the kids to a church outreach event in Jackson. Small congregation, modest food drive, some prayer groups. A man named Brother Eli ran the event. He wasn't listed as a pastor, but he wore a collar, carried a Bible, and he kept trying to get Angela alone, offering to pray with her one-on-one. Diane had reported it to the event organizer. Nothing came of it, but Ramona remembered one thing Diane had said afterward. There was something wrong in his voice, like he was repeating a line from memory, but didn't understand the words. So now the theory was clear. Elijah had fixated on Diane. Maybe her kindness, maybe her beauty, maybe her children. And he did what predators do. He watched, he followed, he waited, until one night he came home. Detectives found new evidence hidden in the Whitaker home's basement, behind a false wall. It was a mattress, a lantern, empty cans of beans, a notepad. The pages were torn, but the cover was intact. On it, in all caps, "Notes for God." They had it analyzed. Invisible ink revealed dozens of pages filled with one repeated phrase. "I told him this was my house. I told him this was my house. I told him this was my house." Over and over, as if writing it made it true. The family's last days were reconstructed as best they could be. Authorities now believe Elijah Owens had been living inside the house for at least 4 weeks before the murders. He accessed the attic and basement through maintenance panels. He came out at night, watched them from vents, listened to them sleep. Angela may have been the first to notice. She wrote weeks before the disappearance. "Something's wrong. I hear creaks, but Dad says it's the house settling. I don't think houses whisper. Marcus, just 9, had nightmares. Screamed about the man with no eyes. Diane took him to a child therapist. No one thought to look under the floorboards. Then came April 2nd. Neighbors recalled nothing strange. No screams. No flashing lights. Just quiet. Until Angela's voice recorder, discovered 10 years later, whispered what really happened. He came out of the vent. Dad told me to take Marcus and hide in the attic, but the door slammed. I think he's still down there. I hear noises. He says we'll stay forever. He says he needs us to be part of the walls. The FBI came to believe Charles was killed first, beaten, Diane next, likely trying to defend her children. Angela and Marcus were taken upstairs, locked in, and over the next 2 days, they starved, they cried, they left their last messages. Angela scratched her name into wood, pressed her palm to the attic window, and finally clicked record one last time. If you hear this, we are here. Please don't let the house forget us. That line became the name of the federal task force, Operation Forget-Me-Not. Their mission? To find every house Owens may have touched, every missing family he may have watched, every hidden crawl space that may still hold a story. By the fall of 2006, they had a list, 7 addresses, across 3 states, all connected by 3 things: families who vanished without trace, houses later sold or abandoned, unusual construction work reported just before the disappearances, and in all of them, the attics had been sealed. Elijah Owens, if still alive, wasn't just a fugitive. He was a phantom in wood and wire, a man who built silence with a hammer, who turned grief into drywall, who believed the attic was sacred, because it was where he'd learned how to make pain invisible. But one thing he hadn't counted on was a girl who refused to vanish quietly, Angela Whitaker, 14 years old, frightened, hungry, dying, and still she told the truth, because sometimes, even in the dark, a whisper is louder than a scream. Elijah Franklin Owens was never declared legally dead. He was declared something worse, untraceable, a name with no home, a face with no known photograph, a predator who didn't break in, but blended in. He didn't chase his victims. He watched them, studied them, and waited for their walls to open. By 2007, the case had gone national. Father Eli was no longer a local Mississippi legend. He was now one of the FBI's most wanted unknown suspects. 7 cold cases were reopened. Each followed a pattern. A family disappears overnight. Their home appears untouched. A faint, rotting smell is later discovered in the ceiling, basement, or walls. And always, somewhere on the property, a single phrase, carved or written: "This is my house now." The FBI task force, Operation Forget-Me-Not, sent agents across state lines. Tennessee, Alabama, Louisiana, even as far west as Texas. One home in Shreveport revealed a chilling detail: a sealed wall inside the master bedroom. Inside it, a mattress, melted candle stubs, and scraps of newspaper. One of those scraps held a name written in red ink: Marcus W., the name of the Whitaker boy, which meant Elijah had kept track of his victims, even years later, even after they were gone. Agent Yvonne Lake began building a psychological profile. What she'd pieced together painted a portrait far darker than anyone expected. Owens wasn't killing out of rage. He was building something. A twisted theology of ownership, control, and silence. To him, families were occupants of a structure he already believed belonged to him. He didn't invade their homes. He reclaimed them, just as he'd been locked away as a child. He now became the warden, repeating the cycle of control with brutal precision. One former nurse from a Marlowe Institute came forward in March of 2007. Her name was Dorothy Giles, 78. She remembered Elijah from 1978. He used to draw floor plans. Not cartoons, not people, just houses, rooms, attics. He called them sanctuaries. She kept one of his sketches. It showed a house with no windows, Just one door, and deep in the center, a staircase leading to nowhere. He had written beneath it, "If they are beneath me, they cannot leave me." That phrase stuck with Lake. If they are beneath me, it explained the attic burials, the obsession with elevation, the urge to trap victims above, where no one looked, where no one heard. But then came a break, and it didn't come from law enforcement. A man named Malcolm Rudd, a house inspector in Baton Rouge, filed a tip. He had been called to inspect a home for a foreclosure auction. The address, 429 Mooney Drive, empty since 1997. No buyer, no records of recent occupation. But inside the attic, he found something behind the insulation, a sealed metal lunchbox. Inside that lunchbox, a girl's hair bow, a set of 3 house keys, a photograph of a black family at a barbecue, and a cassette tape labeled, "They Wouldn't Leave." The tape was sent to Quantico. They played it. It was Elijah, soft voice, measured, almost gentle. "I told them I was a landlord. I told them rent was due in flesh. They didn't understand. I told them this was not theft. This was restoration." Then laughter. Quiet, like someone remembering a joke, only they understood. That family, their names were never found. The photo didn't match any known records. No missing persons filed in that neighborhood in 1997, which meant there were likely more victims than anyone could count. Ghost families, lost in cracks between walls, buried in attics, filed away under drywall and time. A forensic artist enhanced the photograph, posted it online, asking for help. 3 weeks later, a tip came in from a woman in Galveston. She recognized the boy in the photo. His name was Devin Miles. He was 12 when he disappeared, along with his parents and sister, in the summer of '97. They were never found, until now. So, why did Elijah keep the lunchbox? Why not destroy the evidence? Agent Lake had a theory. He didn't want to erase them. He wanted to preserve them, like relics, trophies, proof that the house had once been his, and theirs. To Owens, these weren't murders. They were occupancies. He was the eternal tenant, and everyone else was just passing through. The FBI's new plan was bold. Go public. Release Owens' name. The sketch. The audio. Pressure him. Force him out. Let the country know he wasn't folklore. He was real, and he might be living above your head. A special report aired nationwide. 1 hour. Prime time. Every major network. They told the world. The man known as Father Eli is responsible for at least 7 unsolved family disappearances. He may still be occupying homes today. Look in your attics, your crawl spaces, your forgotten corners. If you hear whispering, it may not be the wind. The FBI set up a national tip line. Thousands of calls poured in. Most were dead ends, but one stood out. A woman named Carrie Lyle from Vicksburg, Mississippi. She said her daughter had been hearing voices in the vents. Whispers. Every night at 3 a.m. She thought it was a prank. Until one night, she pressed her phone against the air vent and hit record. They played the clip. It was faint, broken, but clear enough. "You sleep above me, but this is still my house." Lake dropped her coffee cup. It shattered across the floor, because the voice wasn't just familiar, it was identical. The house was surrounded within an hour. FBI, local police, tactical units. They found no one, but inside the attic, a mattress, a lantern, and written on the wooden beam above, "You're too late. I already moved in next door." And across the street, in the crawl space of the house for sale, fingerprints, matches to the Whitaker home, to the lunchbox, to the wall carvings. He had been there, recently, and once again he was gone. This time, he didn't leave behind a recording. He left something worse. A child's drawing. Crude, shaky, done in red crayon. It showed a family of 4 standing at a window. Behind them, a figure in black, eyes white, hands outstretched. On the back, found a new place to stay. Still watching, always watching. America wasn't just scared anymore. It was terrified, because the worst monsters aren't the ones who kick in the front door. They're the ones already inside the house, behind the walls, in the vents, under your feet, listening, waiting, owning you long before you knew they existed. By now, the nation had one face burned into its nightmares. A man with no photos, a name with no proof, a voice that came through vents and cassette tapes. Elijah Franklin Owens, also known as Father Eli. But despite every broadcast, every search team, every tip, he remained untouched, like smoke in the beams, a whisper behind drywall, until someone finally spoke up, and what she said changed everything. Her name was Erica Wren. She was 31 when she called the tip line, shaking, breathless, hesitant. "I think I survived him," she said. "I didn't know who it was until I heard the tape." Erica lived in Pine Bluff, Arkansas in 1995. Back then, she was 11 years old, living with her grandmother in a faded blue house on Bannon Street. Her mother had passed away. Her father was gone before that. It was just the two of them, Erica and Grandma Myra. And for years, she thought what happened that summer was a dream, a nightmare, something her mind made up to cope. But after hearing the national special on Father Eli, the voice, the words, she knew it wasn't a dream. It was him. Erica's story was quiet at first, but Agent Lake flew down personally to interview her. What Erica shared wasn't just chilling. It was confirmation. Confirmation that Owens had been active before the Whitaker case, and that someone had once escaped. Erica described it like this. It began with noises in the walls. She told her grandmother, who blamed rats. They set traps, called an exterminator. Nothing. Then came the strange objects appearing around the house. A sock that wasn't hers. A comb on the sink with 3 black hairs. A child's toy in the pantry, covered in dust. Things no one in the house owned. Erica said she started locking her bedroom door at night. But the next morning, it was open. One night, her grandmother went to visit a friend. Erica stayed home alone. She heard something in the attic, a thump, then footsteps, then a voice, not loud, just close, pressed to the ceiling vent. "Are you sleeping above me?" She froze, too scared to run, too scared to breathe. Then came the creak of the attic hatch, followed by silence. She called the police. By the time they arrived, the attic was empty, nothing disturbed. But she remembers one of the officers saying, "Could have been a prank, neighborhood kids." So they left, but 2 nights later, she woke up to see a man standing at the foot of her bed. She described him, tall, pale, wearing a dark coat and gloves, and smiling, not wide, just enough to freeze her lungs. He didn't speak. He just placed a single finger to his lips and whispered, "Sure, I'm renting," then walked backward into the hallway. She screamed. Her grandmother came running, but the man was gone. No footprints, no fingerprints, just a faint smell of dust and something rotted. Erica's grandmother moved her out the next day. They never returned to that house. And for years, no one believed her, until 2006, until the Whitaker discovery. Until Angela's tape. When Erica heard the words, "He says we're part of the house now," she collapsed because she remembered him saying something almost identical. If I stay quiet, the house becomes mine. Forensics searched the Pine Bluff home in 2007, now abandoned and sold. In the walls behind the attic crawl space, they found a mattress, a hand mirror, and a notebook. Inside it, she didn't scream the first night. That means she accepted the rent. Agent Lake had to leave the room after reading that, because it wasn't just evidence. It was proof of intent. Elijah Owens wasn't random. He was deliberate, patient, surgical, and now they had a timeline. If Erica encountered him in 1995, then the Whitakers in 1996, the Miles family in 1997, and the Lyles home in 2007, then that meant one thing. He'd been active for at least 12 years, possibly more, and he wasn't slowing down. Another call came in, this time from a man named Raymond Stokes, a former real estate agent in Alabama. He said he'd sold a house in Anniston in 1993 to a quiet man who paid cash. The man said his name was Eli Franklin, no last name. He didn't move in furniture. He didn't have a car, but he boarded up the attic. When Raymond checked on the property weeks later, the man was gone. Inside the attic, they found Bible pages glued to walls, a paper with children's names written over and over, and a sketch of a house with the roof torn off, exposing a family inside, and a dark figure hovering above. The drawing's title? The Watcher. So, what did it mean? Was Elijah Owens mentally ill? A religious fanatic? A sociopath? Agent Lake's psychological report gave one answer. He is a man who believes the attic is holy. It is above sin, a place to observe the world below. He does not see himself as a killer. He sees himself as an architect of judgment. By 2008, 14 properties have been flagged. Each shared disturbing similarities. Hidden insulation spaces, nail marks, faint carvings, and somewhere always a message. One house in Biloxi had this burned into the wood behind a mirror. They heard me breathing, but thought it was the pipes. Another in Shreveport had a message inside a vent. I am still hungry. Then a shock. In August 2008, a small-town mortician in Yazoo City found something in his attic. Not a body, not a weapon, a cassette player half melted by heat. Inside it, a tape, and on that tape, Angela Whitaker's voice. Again, but this time, a different message. I'm trying to be brave, but I'm so tired. If anyone ever hears this, please find Marcus. He's scared of the dark. He thinks the man is God, but I know he's just a man. A broken man with nails in his pockets. Lake cried when she heard it. It meant Owens had taken the tape with him, moved it from one house to another, which meant he still carried their voices, their memories, their stories. Owens wasn't just erasing families. He was curating them, like artifacts, like proof that he had lived among them, and they had become part of his design. A hidden museum, built in drywall, stuffed into attics, rooms no one entered, until it was too late. Now, the FBI believed he was building something bigger, a message, a pattern, not just about families, but about homes, the places we trust, the walls we lean against, the ceilings we sleep under. All of it to him was hollow, and inside that hollowness, he made his cathedral. The nation was no longer asking, who is he? They were now asking, where is he hiding next? Because if Elijah Franklin Owens had lived inside 14 homes, how many more were still holding his secrets? By the summer of 2008, Elijah Franklin Owens was no longer a man. He had become a myth that breathed, a ghost with fingerprints, a whisper with weight. 14 homes across the Deep South, each one a grave. each one a cathedral to his belief that families were tenants, and he was a landlord of their final breath. And now, a 15th home had appeared on the list. The tip came from a handyman in Greenville, Mississippi. His name was Victor Harlan. He'd been sent to bore up an old property, the McKinley place, ahead of storm season. The house was a shell, vacant for over a decade, windows shattered, graffiti across the walls. But the attic? The attic was clean, spotless, in fact, as if someone had been living there. Victor noticed strange things. Footprints in the insulation, a hot plate, still warm, a tattered coat hanging on a nail, and on the wall, in fresh black marker, "I never left. I just changed floors." He called the police. They found more, much more, inside a sealed chest beneath the attic floorboards. Authorities discovered what they later called the gospel box. Inside, a burnt Bible with pages glued shut, a pair of children's shoes, a small metal crucifix, broken at the base, and 11 cassette tapes, numbered 1 to 11. Each tape was labeled with a date and a name. Angela Whitaker was tape 4. Devin Miles was tape 7. Others? Unknown. Victims not yet connected. Families never reported missing, or never believed. The gospel box became Exhibit A. Agent Lake listened to all 11 tapes. What she heard wasn't just confessions. It was doctrine. Owens believed he was chosen, not by God, but by the structure of the home itself. "The attic speaks," he said on tape 1. "It tells me who belongs here, and who must be still." On tape 9, "The boy tried to run, but I told him. The door only opened for quiet." And on tape 11, "When I finish all the rooms, they'll come back. They always come back. Families are just echoes. They return to the house, sooner or later." The FBI released the audio to the public. They hoped someone would recognize the voices of the unnamed victims. One did, a woman named Leah Morgan. She called from Birmingham, Alabama. She said she hadn't heard her brother's voice in 22 years, until tape 6. His name was Bryce Morgan. Disappeared in 1992 with his wife and 2 kids. Their house was declared abandoned. No sign of a break-in. No bodies. Just a faint smell of mold and a message carved into the floorboards of the attic. The family left themselves here. Leah had reported them missing. No one believed her. Until now, Lake reopened the Morgan case. Forensics returned to the original property. The attic had been renovated in 1994. The ceiling lowered, insulation replaced. But behind the drywall, they found it, a sealed compartment. Inside, a lock of hair, a melted candle, and a mirror facing the wood. On the mirror, scratched in glass, "Do you see me now?" It was the first confirmation that Owens had been active before 1995, which meant he had been operating for over 16 years. And then came the breaking point. A man, middle-aged, walked into the FBI field office in Baton Rouge, wearing a denim jacket, hands trembling, eyes wild. He didn't give a name. He said only, "I know where the last house is." He gave them an address. 713 Willow Way, a farmhouse, abandoned, isolated, owned by a shell company. The records led to a dead end, but the deed, signed in 2003, by someone named E. Franklin. Lake coordinated the raid. She brought in drones, thermal scans, a full team. They approached the house at dawn. No signs of movement, no lights, just silence, the kind that hums in the bones. Inside, they found no furniture, no appliances, but in the attic, a shrine, not to God, not to Elijah, to families. Photographs, tacked to every beam, dozens of faces, smiling, posing, all unaware they had been chosen. Some were known victims, others total unknowns, people whose disappearances were never linked. Until now, on a small table, a final cassette tape, tape 12, unlabeled. Lake played it, and for the first time, Owen spoke directly. This is the final room. I've finished the walls. I built them out of voices. If you're hearing this, then I've already left, but you're still inside. Isn't that strange? You came to find me, but now you're mine. A click, then static, then a whisper. Not Owen's. Angela. Her voice. Again, he watches the watchers. Then silence. Behind the wall, they found it. A crawl space. Inside, a sleeping bag. Fresh crumbs. Still warm water bottle. And carved into wall. This is not the last house. Owens had just left. Hours before. Maybe less. And he left behind one final taunt. A drawing pinned to a beam. It showed an agent holding a tape recorder, and behind her, a man in black, crawling from the ceiling. He had been watching them from his house. Lake collapsed in exhaustion. 15 years, 15 homes, dozens of victims, and still no body, no arrest, no end, only shadows. But something shifted after that. No new sightings, no new tapes, no new drawings. It was as if Owens had evaporated, or finally stopped. For the families, there was no comfort in silence, only echoes. But for Lake, there was one final act. She returned to the Whitaker house. Now gutted, condemned, she walked to the attic, sat in the corner where Angela had scratched her name. She played the tape one last time. If you hear this, don't forget us. Lake whispered back. We didn't. And then she lit a match and let the attic burn. After the fire at the Whitaker house, something shifted in the air. Something final. Something heavy, as if the house itself sighed. And finally let go. The attic where Angela whispered her last words. Where Marcus clutched his blanket, where Diane and Charles died trying to protect their children. It was gone. Ashes, charred wood, a black outline on a foundation of grief. A.J. Vaughn Lake stood outside as the flames cooled, smoke curling like ghosts. She had spent 12 years chasing Elijah Franklin Owens, 12 years listening to walls, sifting through bones and beams and floorboards. But now, all she had was silence. No new leads, no new sightings, no more tapes. The world moved on, slowly, like a body learning to walk after trauma. Families rebuilt, streets changed. Children grew up not knowing they were born in homes once soaked in tragedy. But for those who knew the truth, the silence was its own kind of scream. The FBI quietly disbanded Operation Forget-Me-Not in 2009. The official reason? No longer active leads. Unofficially, the agents were haunted. Lake kept her badge, but never returned to fieldwork. She taught criminal psychology at a university in North Carolina, specializing in architectural obsession and spatial predators. A field created because of Elijah. The world tried to explain him. Books were written. Podcasts debated. Was he mentally ill? A victim of childhood trauma? A religious fanatic? A sociopathic architect of pain? Some called him a symbol. Others called him a curse. One criminologist said he was the anti-home, a reminder that even the safest places can be coffins. But one thing remained true. No one ever found him. Not his body. Not his fingerprints. Not his face. The last known evidence, the drawing of an agent being watched, was still pinned to a corkboard in Lake's old office. She stared at it every morning, looking for something. A clue, a pattern, a sign he was still alive, or that he was finally dead. But in 2011, 5 years after the fire, something surfaced. A photo found in the wall of an abandoned gas station in Louisiana, tucked behind a loose panel in the bathroom. It showed a house, ordinary, brick, one story. But on the back, written in faded ink, "Still mine." No signature, no address, just the handwriting, identical to the gospel box. Owens, again. Authorities trace a location. It was in Monroe, Louisiana. The house had been vacant for years. When they searched the attic, they found a single item, a tape, unlabeled, and on that tape, Angela Whitaker's voice. Again, I don't know what day it is. I think he's gone, but I still hear the stairs creak at night. Maybe it's the house now. Maybe it learned from him. The team sat in silence. It meant one thing. Owens had carried that tape with him for years, moved it from attic to attic, as if Angela was a scripture, a voice of guilt, or pride, or both. He wasn't just haunting homes. He was replaying the story wherever he went. That tape was the last known artifact of Elijah Franklin Owens. After that, nothing. No new homes. No new symbols. No new words carved into wood. Just silence. But the fear didn't end. Between 2012 and 2017, over 200 houses across the southern U.S. were searched by local law enforcement based on public tips. Most were false alarms. Raccoons in walls, homeless squatters, strange dreams, creaks and whispers in old rafters. But a few, unexplained. One house in Tulsa, Oklahoma, had a hatch nailed shut from the inside. When opened, they found a melted candle, a drawing of a girl in a window, and carved into the wood. Did you think the story ended? Another home in Baton Rouge had a child's shoe, a mirror cracked in the center, and beneath the floorboards, echoes sleep here. Lake believed Elijah may have died, but his design lived on, as if he'd passed it on, or taught it. One theory gained traction online. It was called the blueprint theory. The idea that Elijah Owens had shared his methods, created disciples, left instructions, like a cult, but without a name. They pointed to the similarities in new cases, the symbols, the phrasing, the obsession with attics and walls. But there was no proof, only fear. And fear, as history shows, is often louder than truth. In 2018, Lake returned to Jackson, Mississippi, for a memorial held in honor of the Whitaker family. The city had placed a plaque on the lot where the house once stood. It read, "Here stood the home of the Whitakers, a family who loved and were loved. May we never forget the silence that stole them." Angela's voice played over a speaker, her final recording, and beneath it, the whispers of children reading her words. "Don't let the house forget us." Lake cried, not just for Angela, but for the hundreds of children who never got to speak, who were taken into attics, sealed into walls, folded into the blueprints of a monster who called himself a prophet of homes. But something strange happened after the ceremony. An old man approached Lake, trembling, alone, wearing a faded black coat. He handed her a small box and whispered, "Some rooms are meant to stay closed," then walked away. By the time she turned, he was gone. Inside the box, a cassette, a map, and a photo. The photo was of Angela, standing at a window, eyes wide, hand pressed to the glass. Behind her, a figure, faint, blurry, but unmistakable. Elijah. Lake locked herself in her car and played the cassette. It was new, not archival, not crackling with age, fresh, and the voice, his, You burned my church, but I built 1,000 more. The attic always returns, even in your dreams. You hear it, don't you? Click. Then Angela's voice. We're still here. By 2019, the name Elijah Franklin Owens no longer just lived in criminal databases. It lived in nightmares, in architecture lectures, in forensic psychology courses, in true crime forums filled with red string and floor plans. Owens had never been captured, never even photographed, but somehow he had become realer than those who hunted him, because unlike a fugitive, Elijah didn't run. He waited, and after the box, the cassette, the photo of Angela, Yvonne Lake knew he wanted to be found, or at least to be heard, but he was no longer simply a man with a hammer and a hiding place. Now, he was a legend with blueprints. In the months after the ceremony, Lake began digging, not into evidence, but into architecture. She remembered something from Elijah's early psychiatric files. The boy draws houses. No people, no nature, just roofs, walls, attics. Always an attic. One drawing from 1978 stuck with her. A 3-story house with no doors, just one long staircase leading up into a black square labeled Me. She took it to an architect in Raleigh, an old professor, specialist in early 20th century construction. When he saw the drawing, he froze, then said, "That's not fantasy. That's based on the Baines method." Lake looked into it. The Baines method was a forgotten architectural style from the 1930s, used in only a few hundred homes across the Deep South. It focused on air circulation, vent systems, crawl spaces, dual-level attics. But it had a fatal flaw. Sound carried too well. Voices whispered through walls. Creaks echoed like footsteps. Every home built with the Baines method was haunted before anyone moved in. They were homes that seemed alive, and those were the homes Elijah chose. Lake created a map of every Baines-style house, still standing. Over 400 across Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. Of those, 17 were confirmed to have had some connection to Owens. It was a pattern. He wasn't just squatting. He was following a blueprint, a design. He wasn't looking for any house. He was looking for that kind of house. The ones that whispered, the ones that echoed, the ones that held secrets. In late 2019, Lake got a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Savannah, Georgia. Inside, a house key, a black and white photo, and a page torn from a Bible. On the page, a verse circled in red. The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. And below it, in handwriting she now knew by heart, "Come see what I built." The photo showed a modest 2-story home, wrap-around porch, tall windows, overgrown lawn. Lake showed it to an analyst. The home matched a known Baines property, one that had burned in 2003, or so they thought. Lake traveled to Savannah. She found the house. It was there, still standing, choked by vines, the mailbox filled with cobwebs, but inside, intact. The floors were dusty but untouched. Furniture minimal. Attic hatch open. Lake climbed the stairs slowly. Every step creaked, and at the top, she found a room. The attic was different than any she'd seen before. Circular, almost like a dome. No corners. At the center, a single wooden chair. Facing the wall, on the wall, a mirror, and in that mirror, her own face. But beside it, carved into the frame, "You finally made it." Lake turned. No one, no sounds, only the breath of the house. Beneath the chair, a box. Inside, a tape recorder, a candle, and a note. Every home needs its pastor. I was theirs. You'll be next. She took the tape recorder and left. Didn't sleep that night. Didn't speak for 2 days. Then she pressed play. You don't understand yet. It was never about the families. It was about the silence, the way it breathes, the way addicts remember things you don't. Then Angela's voice. Again, he said the house talks to him. He says it tells him who belongs here. He said we belonged here. And now, I think I believe him. After that, Lake retired completely, vanished from public life, moved to Maine, wrote a single book, a memoir titled Rooms That Breathe. It sold poorly, but became a cult favorite in crime circles. In the years that followed, rumors never stopped. In New Orleans, a family claimed their child saw a man in the attic. In Mobile, police discovered bones inside a sealed vent, human, decades old. In Little Rock, a woman found her son sleepwalking into the crawl space each night, whispering, "He lives under the roof." Each case lacked clear links to Owens, but each bore his fingerprints in spirit, in design. Some believe he's still alive. Others say he died in that Savannah house, that the final tape was a death confession, but no body was ever found. No final message. Only homes, empty and filled with memory. In 2023, a YouTube channel surfaced. It posted one video. No intro, no voiceover, just the static of an old tape. And then a girl's voice. Angela, if this story stays with you, tell someone, because silence is how he wins. The video ends with one frame. A house, unfamiliar, new, and a message. The story isn't over, just moved upstairs. The last known image of Angela Whitaker was not a photo. It was a sound, a whisper in the dark, a voice passed from attic to attic, cassette to cassette, memory to memory, until even machines that carried her words began to wear down. But she remained, in breath, in wood grain, in every house that creaked when no one was home. Angela didn't die in silence. She became part of something that could never be silenced again. In the years after Savannah, Elijah Franklin Owens became something new, not a suspect, not a man, but a theory, a curse whisper between realtors, a story told on moving day, a name only spoken in certain circles, architects who removed attics from new home plans, psychologists who specialize in residual housing trauma, and families who never could quite explain why their children stopped sleeping once they moved in. A podcast called Sealing Eyes became viral, run by a woman named Tessa Moore, a former social worker who claimed to have found a second gospel box. This one was inside an abandoned school outside Montgomery. Same contents: tapes, drawings, personal items, a piece of paper stapled to the lid. Second edition. For the next one watching, Tessa didn't turn the box over to authorities. She digitized it, published it all. Millions listened. And for the first time, the voices of the unknown children Elijah had taken were heard around the world. One tape in particular, labeled Mia age 9, lasted 58 seconds. I don't think he's a person. He's the noise before the light turns on. I think he lives inside the house. Or maybe the house lives inside him. That sentence became famous. Merch printed it. People tattooed it. But very few understood what it meant. In the final year of her life, Yvonne Lake gave one last interview. It aired on a local channel, quietly. Only a few thousand people watched it. She was older, tired, but her voice still unwavering. The interviewer asked, "Did you ever come close to catching him?" She nodded. "I think I sat right below him once. ate lunch in the living room while he listened from the attic. What would you say to him now if he could hear you? Lake looked off camera, then whispered, "You were just a man, but we made you a monster. And I think that's what you always wanted." That was the last time she spoke publicly. She died 2 months later. In her attic, investigators found one tape recorder, an unopened letter, and a drawing pinned to the ceiling beam above her bed. The drawing showed a girl at a window, Angela, and beneath it, in Owen's handwriting, "Still listening." There are still hundreds of cold cases tied to Owens, dozens of families who never came home, thousands of houses across the U.S. where something doesn't feel right, a floorboard that creaks wrong, a smell that lingers, a wall too thick for its space. And somewhere in those houses, perhaps still today, a tape, a voice, a reminder that the story never truly left. It just moved rooms. Legacy. It's a word used too easily. We give it to athletes, politicians, celebrities. But sometimes, legacy belongs to the ones who were never supposed to leave it. Angela Whitaker, Marcus Whitaker, Diane and Charles. The family that disappeared in 1996. Not in the wind, not into myth, but into walls. And even now, someone, somewhere, is buying a new house, moving boxes in, smiling in the front yard. But they don't know yet that the attic above them has fingerprints, or that the mirror in the hallway was turned to face the wall for a reason. And if they listen, really listen, they might hear a soft click, a tape sliding in, a breath. And then, if this story stays with you, subscribe. Tell me where in the world you're watching from.